I'm really happy to welcome back to the podcast Michael Reagan, who was the eldest son of former President Ronald Reagan. Michael Reagan has debated Mikhail Gorbachev. He's, I didn't know this, set world records in powerboat racing. I do know that he was for 2 decades a conservative radio talk show host heard across the country on syndicated networks. And he is now the chairman and president of the Reagan Legacy Foundation. Michael, welcome. What a pleasure. You know, just yesterday, Debbie, my wife, was reading from your dad's D-Day speech on the anniversary of D-Day. And she literally was almost bursting into tears as she was reading it. And your dad had that kind of an impact on people, which is almost unthinkable in politics today. Is it just because it was a different era, or do you think there was something about your dad that brought out that kind of a deeply resonant response in people?
Because it was in his heart. It wasn't just a speech, it was actually in his heart. And, you know, I tell politicians who ask me, about my father, I said, it's not about hearing your speech, it's about feeling your speech. And with my father's speeches, you really felt them. That's why you can listen today to the Point to Hawk speech and you will cry at the right time, every time, because it's so heartfelt by my father. Remember, my father was the first president to actually go to Normandy and speak on D-Day, the 40th anniversary. And every president since then, Dinesh, has gone on a D-Day and spoken on a D-Day, followed suit of Ronald Reagan. But nobody makes you feel the speech like my father did.
Now, let's think about that for a moment, because, George H.W. Bush was himself a World War II veteran. He was a bomber pilot. Your dad made movies in World War II, and he was a member of the World War II generation, but he actually wasn't in the trench. And yet, ironically, if you put George H.W. Bush and your dad side by side, your dad's connection with the veterans and with the military was stronger. So what that tells me is that leadership isn't merely a matter of you kind of do it yourself, but it is somehow a matter of being able to absorb the significance of the moment and to communicate it.
Absolutely right. My father, remember, did 300 films during World War II, training films for the military. So he was very aware of the military. He retired as a captain in the military, and he was offered the rank of major. He thought that's not fair. Somebody who's the rank of major should be able to serve overseas. He couldn't because of his eyesight. So he stayed here, did 300 training films. I learned about America sitting in the right front seat of a station wagon on any given Saturday morning, listening to my father sing to me the Marine Corps hymn and the Army, the Navy, the Coast Guard. My father was truly the Boy Scout in the family. Maureen and I used to joke and say, something, running for the presidency of the United States for him is like going for his Eagle badge. I mean, that's what it was all about with my dad. I learned about patriotism there in the right front seat of a car. He was always the patriot, always that person. He never changed all of his life. That's who he was. And I think we're all better off because of it, because we can go back and listen to those speeches and really understand them and really feel the moment that he was in. That's why I started the Reagan Legacy Foundation back in early 2000 to supply scholarships to the men and women who served aboard the U.S. and still serve aboard the USS Ronald Reagan. And now we have the BRIC Project at St. Mary Glees, Normandy, France. First town free by America on D-Day at 4 a.m. in the morning. If you watch The Longest Day or you watch Saving Private Ryan, all of the paratroopers headed that direction. And you go online to walkawaytovictory.com, purchase a brick in the name of a loved one. We'll put it in the ground at St. Mary Glees. That's
amazing. You were mentioning just before we went on that you've debated Mikhail Gorbachev 3 times. One thing I said when I was doing my book on your dad in the 1990s, I was able to interview Gorbachev just briefly through a translator, a guy named Pavlichenko. You may have actually crossed paths with this guy.
Exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, but what I found remarkable was to get an adversary in the Cold War. I mean, essentially your dad's counterpart in the Soviet Union to not only say nice things about your dad, but in a sense to acknowledge that his own outlook was reshaped by your dad, which is virtually unbelievable in international relations to be able to actually get through to your opponent. And do you think it was, again, just your dad's embodiment of American principles and his personal sincerity of conviction that broke the ice with Gorbachev?
I think it was upon both of them. That on my dad's side, of course, Mikhail Gorbachev's side. What I learned in one of the debates, which was unbelievable, nobody knew until I got to this point. My dad used to end every talk with him, if it's God's will. And Mikhail Gorbachev said to me, well, I didn't see God in the room. And he felt really bad about saying that because he got applause in San Francisco when he said that. And he looked around like, oh my God, what have I done? And so I talked to him about his family, found out that his wife, Raisa, her parents were killed by the Gestapo for simply having religious symbols out in their house. And I asked him about his family. He said, my family had religious symbols too, hidden behind pictures of Stalin and what have you. So they were hidden. But what we really found out was that his grandmother was a Christian, and she went to church every day. And she would come visit Mikhail Gorbachev there in Russia, in Moscow, and knock on the door and walk in and say, Mikhail, I went to church today. I prayed for you atheists. I prayed for you today, Mikhail. And so when Dad was saying, if it's God's will, and he was saying, I didn't see God in the room, his grandmother made sure God was in the room.
That's fascinating. Let's take a short break. I'll be right back with Michael Reagan. Have you noticed it's pretty colorful at the grocery store in the produce section, all those vibrant colors of fruits and veggies? Well, our friend Dr. Howard at Balance of Nature explains that all those colors you see represent nutritional variety. Different colors signify different key nutrients. So if you eat only your favorite one or two veggies, well, you're missing a whole world of vital nutrients. That's why Debbie and I take those 6 little fruits and veggies capsules. Here they are each day. Each daily dose is made up of a blend of 31 different fruits and veggies. 31. Variety equals vitality. Give your body everything it needs with Balance of Nature. Invest in your health. Join me and experience the Balance of Nature difference for yourself for years to come. For a limited time, all new preferred customers get an additional 35% discount and free shipping on your first Balance of Nature order. Use discount code BALANCE. Call 800-246-8751. That's 800-246-8751, or go to balanceofnature.com and use discount code BALANCE. I'm back with Michael Reagan, the eldest son of former President Ronald Reagan, now chairman and president of the Reagan Legacy Foundation. Michael, most of us know your dad as somebody that we worked for or somebody who was our president, but you know him in an unusual capacity. And not only did you have Ronald Reagan, U.S. president, as your dad, but you had an Oscar winner, Jane Wyman, as your mom. I want to ask you, with Father's Day coming up, talk a little bit about the father-son relationship of you to your dad, and then I'm going to ask you about Hollywood and the world of your parents.
Yeah, try to live up to that one. Oscar winner and President of the United States. Oh, number one question asked to me is, what do you do? It's interesting. I grew up in a family with Midwest values. My mother from St. Joe, Missouri, my dad from Tampico, Dixon, Illinois, and they had those values, and they instilled those values in the family, or at least tried to instill those values in the family. You don't know till you get older if it worked. But my dad, was divorced from my mom when I was 3 years old, but he never forgot he had that first family. Never. So many fathers do. He never did. And so Saturdays was with Dad, riding horses, shooting ground squirrels, swimming, chopping firewood, painting fences with my father. I so look forward to those. And Father's Day, we always spent, when Dad had Alzheimer's, what have you, we always spent time with him, the whole family, on Father's Day. We never missed a Father's Day to be able to do that. And I wrote a book, Lessons My Father Taught Me, which you can get at Amazon. And in it, I talk about those lessons that he, in fact, taught me about patriotism, what have you. But probably the number one thing he taught me, Dinesh, was forgiveness. He taught me how to forgive because he forgave John Hinckley for what John Hinckley did to him, trying to kill him. And I said, if my father could do that, why do I hold things and not forgive? And that was such an important lesson to learn from him, because he forgave John Hinckley. Pope John Paul forgave the man who tried to kill him. Months later, they would get together and form a bond that would bring freedom to Poland and ultimately go around the world and bring down the Berlin Wall.
I mean, it's been quite an experience for me to see the Reagan Ranch, which obviously you saw frequently from the inside, because it has the personality of your dad. And I even noticed that in the books that are up there on the shelf, it's got some of his writings and markings in them. During your dad's presidency, many people derided him. He's not an intellectual, he's a movie actor. But I found it very striking. And I think now with the publication of Brinkley's The Reagan Diaries and other works, the intellectual reputation of your dad is getting greater recognition, isn't it?
When I tell young people, at Young Americans Foundation, who meets at the ranch and what have you, readers are leaders. And if you go through my dad's library, he read every one of those books you ever see in his library. He read them backwards and forwards on so many occasions. That's what he would do. He was a great leader because he was a great reader of history and everything else. We just buried an animal at the ranch about 3 weeks ago. We're still using the ranch. We still use Boot Hill up there. So we took the whole family up and buried the cat, 17 years old. And so we still go to the ranch. We visit with people up there. We take people on tours and what have you. It's a great place, but I will tell you, as you saw the ranch, you've been there. If there was never a ranch, there never would have been a White House. There never would have been a library. There never would have been a presidency, because he garnered so much strength from the ranch. And I grew up on 2 other ranches in Malibu and in the valley. So I understand what the ranch meant to him.
I mean, I don't know if he's still around, but was it John Barletta, who was initially a Secret Service agent and then was working at the ranch with the Reagans, and he would ride horses with Reagan. And I remember him talking about the importance of the outdoors to your dad and how those fences at the ranch were built by your dad himself. This was not a case where right? He did it himself, and he buried the dogs himself when they passed away.
We had dogs up there, we had horses up there, and what have you. John Barletta was a great guy. It shows you what volunteerism does, because the Secret Service asked when Dad became president, does anybody know how to ride a horse? And Barletta raised his hand. Never been on a horse in his life, but he raised his hand and volunteered and became, of course, a Secret Service agent in charge of the ranch. John died a couple of years ago, and his ashes are spread at Rancho del Cielo, which was a wonderful thing for him and for his family to have that, because he spent so much time there and had such a great relationship, with my father. He was a great guy.
I got to tell Ray, just one more issue before we close, and that is when Debbie and I visited the ranch, we noticed that, and this is a mark of your dad, but also Nancy's frugality, because they had these 2 twin beds at the ranch that were tied together with a kind of a tie. So rather than spend the money on getting a king bed and putting a larger bed in there, they had 2 beds that were sort of strapped together in a kind of makeshift way, obviously to save a couple of bucks.
Yeah, but if you go there, if you remember correctly, Dinesh, at the end of my dad's side of the bed, there was a little lounge area, whatever. So because Dad was long, he was 6'1", 6'2", and so the bed was too short for him. So he put a little table at the end of the bed that had pillows on it, and that's where his feet would be. Because he did that because Nancy liked the bed; she was comfortable in it, so he had to make it comfortable for himself. That's why at the end of the bed on his side, there was a table with sheets and a pillow and what have you, so he had a place to put his feet. That's who he was. I mean, that's exactly who he was. He never changed from, I don't think, the day he was born, the day he was raised in Dixon, Tampico, Illinois, till the day he passed away. He had a great heart.